All right, so we are recording now. Welcome to everybody joining us on YouTube as well. So we've got a little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way here. First off, my name is Jamie Vibach, and I am the Will County Director with the Conservation Foundation. We'll talk a little bit more about who TCF is in just a minute, but my job is to oversee everything that we have going on here in lovely Will County, Illinois. But also, because of the shutdown, all of this stuff I had going on got canceled. I decided to start doing these webinar series. So since I couldn't do live in-person presentations like I'd normally be doing, we decided to go virtual with it. So welcome everybody who's joining us today. So because this is a webinar format, everyone's muted, your cameras are off. I can't see and hear you, but hopefully you can hear and see me okay. If you have any questions, please use that Q&A box. That'll let everybody else see your question. It also makes it easier for me to find them all. I'm kind of flying solo today. I don't have anybody helping me out with the questions. So sometimes if there's a lot of people in the chat, stuff can get lost there. Speaking of the chat, you should only be able to see things that I post in the chat, but you can all chat with me. So if you have comments and things you want to put in there, I can see them, but everybody else can't. So, and that's for your safety. So in case somebody can get around that, don't click any links other than anything I might post in the chat. So these webinars are offered to the public for free. However, we do encourage you to consider a donation or a membership. The Conservation Foundation is a nonprofit, and we are supported by our wonderful members and donors. And the more people that we have attending these webinars, the more it does cost us to run them. So at the end of the webinar, you're going to be taken to a page that's got a whole bunch of resources on it, plant guides, butterfly guide, all kinds of great stuff on there. I don't even know what all cool stuff they've thrown up on that that page, but there's lots of good stuff there. But there's also a virtual tip jar. So if you are enjoying these, I do encourage you to keep donating to help keep us running. So this also makes you a member. There's a little checkbox there you can check to become a member, and so you can enjoy a variety of members only stuff. Also, we are going to be changing up in August the format of these webinars a little bit. Rather than running them twice a week at 1 o'clock, as people are going back to work, I'm not sure that's working for everybody. So we're going to move these to once a week on Wednesdays. But we're trying to figure out what time. So we do have a survey up in the stories section of our Facebook page. So head on over there and let us know. Does the 1 o'clock time still work for you? Or would you prefer an evening time, maybe earlier in the day? I don't know. Go ahead and answer those couple of questions we have there. That would really help us out. Upcoming webinars for July, we are continuing to do the twice a week though. So on Monday, I'm going to be joined by Trajectory Energy Partners, where we're going to be talking about community solar. This is a really cool project, can help you save on your electric bill while using solar energy. So getting off those fossil fuels and starting up with solar energy. I myself am looking into signing up right now because it sounds really, really cool. And on Thursday, we're going to be talking about basic tree care for the homeowner. I have Skeet joining us from Bartlett here, and he's an awesome guy. He's going to be talking all about how to take care of your trees, common tree pests and diseases. It's going to be great. So I'm really looking forward to that one. So that's what we have going on there. And without further ado, let's talk about some birding. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Go, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. All right. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some beginner bird watching at home. And these 3 pictures here, all pictures that were taken, I think some actually my mom took, because my parents have a really nice bird feeder set up in their backyard too, and they got some really cool birds this year as well. So as I mentioned, we are the Conservation Foundation. This is our mission statement. So we're protecting the health of our communities as well as our open space and water, our habitats for our critters, all that kind of good stuff. And we are accredited, which probably doesn't mean a lot to most of you, but just know it means we're doing things the right way. It's really hard to get that accreditation, so that's something we're really proud of. This is all the land that we have helped to preserve. Over 35,000 acres, 200 parcels, 43 conservation easements in 7 counties. So we work in and around the Chicago suburbs, all over the place. And most of the time it's sort of behind the scenes work, which is really cool. So we do a lot, and we've been around for a while, over 45 years. So we do a lot of stuff. And conservation obviously is important because it's preserving our quality of life, our water quality, our air quality, habitats. It's good for kids, and it's our responsibility to future generations to protect all of this for them as well. All right, so setting up your bird feeder station. So for those of you who don't have bird feeders, or those of you who do and are looking to add a little bit more, personally, I'm looking to add a few more to mine. There are lots of different types of feeders. A lot depends on the type of seed that you're going to use. So different types of seed attract different types of birds. And the feeder you're going to use will help depend on the birds that you're going to see. So if you have a mixed seed feeder, like the one on the top right, that mixture usually has like sunflower seeds and stuff. We'll talk about mixes later. But that type of feeder is going to bring in a lot of different types of birds, including woodpeckers, nuthatches that you see there. Or you could have a tube feeder with thistle seed, or Niger is another name for that. And those thistle feeders are usually kind of that tube shape, and you're going to bring in mostly finches with those. Or you could have a platform feeder like the lower right. All kinds of birds will eat from the platform feeder. Even though you see a lot of finches on there, most birds will eat from a platform, including some mourning doves. Normally you only see mourning doves on the ground, but sometimes you'll see, if the platform is big enough, you'll see some mourning doves in there too. In the middle, you see we've got a suet feeder there. Suet feeders should really only be hung up in the winter because the fat that's in there can go rancid if it's really hot out. Plus it melts and can coat the bird's feathers, and it's not good for them. So definitely suet feeders in the winter are a good idea, but not so much when it warms up. And then on the far left there, you can see my oriole feeder. Orioles are really bizarre in that they like that jelly, grape jelly and oranges. For whatever reason, those are the two things Orioles absolutely love. And I put an oriole feeder, that exact one actually, out early this spring. I have had so many Orioles in my yard, more than I've ever seen. So you just have to keep replenishing it, but we'll definitely talk a little bit more about Orioles and their feeders in a minute. But having a variety of these feeders and having them at different heights is actually really good too, because if you think about it, birds feed at different places in the forest canopy. You have those who hang out in the very tops of the trees, getting insects and things like that out of those top branches. Then you have some that hang around more in the mid-level, and then you have some that eat along the ground. So having things at different heights caters to different types of birds. So as we mentioned, there's lots of different types of seed. So seed mixes are generally good. That'll bring in your widest variety of birds. Mixes usually contain things like black oil sunflower seeds, millet, peanuts. Some of the higher end ones will have berries in them. When you get the mixes though, you don't go for the bargain basement cheapest kind. Those generally will have a lot of filler in them that the birds just don't like. And all they're gonna do is spit it out, kick it out. It'll make a mess at the bottom of your feeder. You'll go through the seed a lot faster because they're kicking out all the junk to get to the good stuff. And some of those seeds might even sprout. So, you know, you're really better off to spend the money on a little bit higher quality seed that has less of the, what is it? It's, I don't know if it's millet, but you know, the cheaper filler type stuff in it that they're not even going to eat anyway. I splurged and bought a little bit better quality of seed from my local nursery, and I'll tell you what, the birds are not emptying that feeder nearly as fast as they used to. They're taking their time with it because they're eating everything and stuff's not going to waste. So as they're eating, they are eating it, and I'm seeing more birds around there, but the feeder's not emptying nearly as quickly. So you can also buy sunflower seeds. Usually it might be called black oil sunflower seeds. It's got a thinner shell on it, but these are the guys you're going to bring in. These are the guys who like to crack open those seeds and get the sunflower seeds inside. You can get the shelled or the unshelled kind. If you get the the kind that are still in the shell, you may have a little bit of the hulls underneath your feeder, but those generally decompose pretty quickly. But just know that you will see that. But you can also get the shelled kind, and they love that as well. Peanuts, these are the guys who tend to like peanuts a lot. Again, shelled or unshelled, especially your blue jays, your cardinals, your woodpeckers, those guys love, love, love the peanuts. Oh, the blue jays especially, I've heard they love shelled peanuts a lot. But even like chickadees and nuthatches, they'll carry them off even if they're in the shell, and sometimes cache them for later. But beware, squirrels also like peanuts, so if you put peanuts out, you may get some squirrels with those too. These are the thistle eaters. These guys will hang off your those tube feeders or the sock feeders that you might have with your thistle or Niger. N-Y-J-E-R is the Niger seed. Yeah, lots of bright color, especially this time of year with the goldfinches. They love that thistle seed. Suet, again, put it out in the winter, but these are who you will attract with your suet. And by the way, this isn't by any means meant to be an all-encompassing list. It's just to give you an idea of who you're going to bring in with the various types of foods. So, and then mealworms. A lot of people don't know about feeding mealworms, but if you think about it, a lot of these birds eat insects. And so mealworms are a thing you can get from a pet store or any place that sells bird supplies, and you put a little tray of these mealworms out, and these guys just go nuts for them, even at a time when they may not be coming so much to your feeder. So during the summer, late spring, when they're feeding their babies, that's really what they want, are these mealworms. So that's an option that you can use as well. And as I mentioned, special food, orioles and catbirds too. I didn't realize when I put my oriole feeder out, I was going to attract catbirds, but I have had this pair of catbirds coming to my oriole feeder just all summer long, ever since I put it out in the spring. They fight the orioles for it, and it's actually kind of funny to watch. We'll talk more about catbirds. I have grown to love catbirds, but for whatever reason, grape jelly, I don't know what it is about grape jelly. They love grape jelly. I've tried putting other flavors out when I ran out of grape, and they won't touch it. They just like grape jelly for some reason. And then the orange halves too. You just kind of skewer an orange on a feeder like that, or on any kind of spike, they'll eat it. And then hummingbirds as well. I know you can get a lot of the different types of hummingbird food pre-mixed and all that from the pet store, but you really don't need to. The best recipe for hummingbird nectar is a 1/4 cup of white sugar, and you want plain white sugar, not brown sugar, not honey, not any of the specialty kinds of natural whatever kinds of sugars, just plain white sugar to a cup of water. So it's 4 to 1. Mix that together, heat it up till the sugar all dissolves into the water, and then add it to your feeder. You do have to be careful this time of year when it's hot out, because that nectar in there will go bad kind of quickly. So you want to make sure you're replacing it often. In cooler weather, you can let it go a week or so, but when it's real hot out, you should probably be changing it every couple of days. And please, 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 no red dyes. Red dyes are really bad for your hummingbirds. I don't know why they put those dyes in the commercially prepared foods, but yeah, definitely don't use the red dye stuff. Also, when you're changing the nectar out of there, make sure you clean your feeders. And actually, this goes for all feeders in general. You should clean them out fairly regularly, because they can develop molds and things like that. Especially with hummingbirds, there are some that can make them really, really sick. So definitely make sure you're cleaning out your hummingbird feeders as well. All right, I'm going to stop and take a look. Oh, bird in the upper left corner. Okay, let me go back. We had two. Top left, that is a house sparrow. So house sparrows are not native. I'll talk a little bit later about where they come from. But yeah, in the picture here, and I should apologize. I'm going kind of under the assumption that most people know at least a few birds, but just in case they don't, let me go through these really quick. Okay, so up here in the top left, we have a house sparrow. We have our cardinal pair. That's the female on the right. The female is usually the duller color and the male is the bright red. We've got our blue jay. Then in the middle row on the left, that's a black-capped chickadee. Those are fun ones to have too. And then in this center square is our goldfinch. Then we have the, I believe that's a tufted titmouse. Then in the right center, and then nuthatch on the left, bottom left, mourning dove, bottom middle, and finally a downy woodpecker in the lower right. I will definitely talk more about woodpeckers in a minute. So, so there you go. So those are the birds that we had there. Hopefully that answered everybody's questions. Oh, Milo. Yeah, Milo is, I think, one of the fillers that they had in seed. So, all right. So here we go. Setting up your station. Really, again, so I've mentioned this before in some of my webinars, but if you want to attract any kind of wildlife to your yard, you got to give them what they need. So all living things, you know, you ask any second grader, what do all living things need to survive? We need food, we need water, we need shelter. So we've already covered the food. So give them the food, that'll really help bring them in, but they also need water. So having some kind of little water feature in your yard is really beneficial for them. And it can be something as simple as just a dish of water. You know, it's kind of a fancy one there in the lower left, but, you know, just anything from a plain dish of water to, you know, something that's got a little fountain in it that keeps the water moving to, you know, I mean, hey, if you've got a little pond set up in your yard, when it was working, I had a little stream, man-made sort of thing in my yard that went down into a pond. I can't tell you how many birds I saw taking a little bath in that stream. It was so adorable. So something about birds bathing just cracks me up. I don't know. But I saw more birds bathing in that little stream and I loved it. So any kind of bird bath, everybody needs to drink. Birds like to cool off sometimes in the summer by splashing around in the water, and it helps keep them clean and keep the little parasites off and stuff. So having just some kind of water in there. That said, you want to make sure to change the water out or have something that will mix the water up to discourage mosquitoes. You don't want to accidentally set up a mosquito breeding station. So either change the water out every couple of days or have something in it, like you can see the little fountain in here or down here, something that keeps the water moving and recirculating. That will, that'll help discourage mosquitoes. And then shelter, this is the last thing. So you wanna have some kind of shrubbery or something that they can take cover in, because occasionally you start feeding other types of birds that you weren't really intending to, and I'm talking about hawks. So occasionally hawks will see your bird feeder as a buffet and they will come in to pick up a snack. So you want to give your birds some place to go hide. Everybody needs to eat, but you want to give them a fighting chance. So putting shrubs, having some kind of cover in there. I've seen people use like old Christmas trees even, especially like in the winter, just put the old Christmas tree out there and let the birds kind of hang out in there. But just something that's got some structure to it. These bushes that I mentioned here are also beneficial because most of them also produce berries. So now you've got a different kind of bird feeder as well. So I have, it's not the greatest, but I have a mulberry tree near my bird feeders. Birds love hanging out in the mulberry tree and they eat the mulberries. It really brings in more birds than I would normally see with just my feeder because they like the fresh berries. So yes, it kind of makes a mess and it's not the best tree to have up, but it was there and it's doing well. So for now it stays, but any of these shrubs, all very, very good choices. They add a little interest to your bird feeder station, but they also add a little shelter for those birds to take cover in as well. Honeysuckle and buckthorn are big no-nos, however. These are both highly, highly invasive shrubs and trees here in the Chicago region. But not only are they invasive because they're, you know, bad for the open spaces, they're actually really bad for birds. Buckthorn was planted around here in the 1950s. The Morton Arboretum actually recommended it to municipalities because it kept its leaves longer in the fall and got leaves early in the spring, and it, you know, produced these berries that the birds would eat. Yay! Except that the berries give the birds diarrhea, and it dehydrates them and has actually killed off a lot of birds. It's actually known to be one of the drivers of bird loss in this area. So buckthorn is just, it's really bad for birds. It's not a preferred food source, but if there's nothing else, they'll eat it, and then it makes them sick. And then when they poop out the seeds, now we've got new buckthorn trees planted. Bad, bad news. Honeysuckle is very similar. They've also done studies I've read where birds that nest in honeysuckle have a higher chance for their nest to be predated, which means something's getting in and getting the eggs or the young birds, whether it's the structure of the honeysuckle because it's so dense, I don't know. Whatever the reason is, it's bad for birds. So it harms their nest, it harms their young. So honeysuckle and buckthorn, if you're looking to make your yard more bird friendly, get rid of those. Other bird-friendly plants that you might not think of so much as being bird-friendly are all these other great natives. Purple coneflower, I have seen more goldfinches hanging around the purple coneflowers, picking the seeds out in the late summer. They just love it. Columbine, same thing, sedges, but they also feed insects. So for those birds who you're not gonna see at your feeders because they don't eat seeds, they're gonna be getting the insects that hang out in these plants as well. So caterpillars that turn into butterflies, grasshoppers and crickets, all those kinds of things that love to be around our native plants, the birds eat those guys as well. So planting any of these native plants is a good way to help the birds in your yard. And again, this is just a small sampling of them. There are tons more native plants that are really great to plant around here that are beneficial to our pollinators as well as our birds. This is just a small selection of them. So why do we harp so much on native plants? Any of you who've watched my webinars before know I talk a lot about native plants. Well, why is that? First off, they save us time and money. They come back year after year, either by reseeding or because through their roots. And because their roots are so long, we don't have to spend all the time when we're going through these drought periods in the summer. We don't have to spend so much time watering them and fertilizing them and babying them to make them feel like they're wherever home is. But you plant these native plants, that brings in these caterpillars, these butterflies, these other insects and things. And when we bring in these insects, we bring in the things that eat the insects and the caterpillars, like birds. So in the spring, birds are looking for tons and tons of these insects to feed their babies. Caterpillars, I read somewhere, are more nutrient dense than even beef. I mean, how crazy is that? So when you've got a young, and I mean, if you ever watch a mama bird feed the babies, they cram that in baby's mouth. And so these little soft, squishy guys are perfect for that. They're very nutrient dense, they're nice and soft, they go down easy, so very easy to feed to their young. And then we feed these guys. They also help take care of higher up on the food chain too. So this is a Cooper's hawk. I have had them in my yard before, and they're so cool to watch. They are like little fighter jets. They are just, man, they fly fast, they fly accurate, and you know, every now and then they get something, but they got to eat too. So, but now your yards become part of the ecosystem instead of being apart from the ecosystem. So you get to be involved and see all of these stages of life. All right, so now you brought your birds in. How do we see them? Well, every good birder knows you need a good pair of binoculars. Can be very confusing though, because there's all these numbers involved and, you know, who knows what it all is. All right, so a lot of times you'll see it'll say something like 8 by 30, 8x30. And what that means is that first number is your magnification. So if a thing is here, how many times is it magnified? So generally for the beginning birder, anywhere between 7 to 10 is good. 7, 8, the higher you get in magnification, the more narrow that field of view is going to be. And especially when you're beginning, it's a lot easier to find birds and then follow them when you have that wider field of view. So 7, 8, perfectly fine. You will get close enough to be able to see identifying details. That second number then is the lens diameter. And it's the lens, where's my pointer? There we go. So it's this lens here, not the one that's closest to your eye. It's this lens here. So that's in millimeters. How big is that lens? The bigger that lens is, the more light it's going to let in, which is good, especially if you're looking at, say, owls or something maybe in the evening. That lets in more light, you're going to get a clearer image. So the bigger they get, though, the heavier your binoculars are going to be, the more expensive they're going to be. Bigger lenses are more expensive. So again, the best are generally between 30 and 42. So you want to look for that first number to be somewhere 7, 8, no more than 10. And then that second number you want between 30 and 42. So additionally, you want to make sure you try them out because everybody's face is shaped a little bit different. Your eyes are different distances apart. Some people wear glasses, some people don't. So stop into an REI or some kind of store that's going to have a large variety of binoculars so you can try them out before you buy them. You may also see them have a clarity and crispness score, and that's going to tell you how clear your image is going to be. So obviously that's good too, but it's going to drive up your price a little bit. So keep in mind, the less expensive binoculars are really not going to serve you as well because you're going to have these, you know, a good pair of binoculars should last you 20 or 30 years. So, you know, you really get your value's worth. And if you're serious about birding, it may be worth it to spend a little bit more money to get a nicer pair that will last you a long time and help make birding more enjoyable for you. You can also, other things that you want to look at too are the straps. They've got the strap that just kind of hangs around your neck, but if you're going to be out with them a long time, that can get really heavy and put a lot of strain on your neck. They also make harnesses that kind of go through your arms, and so they hold it here, and so the weight is held on your shoulders rather than around your neck. Again, if you're going out for, you know, 15, 20, 30 minutes, it may not be as big a deal, but, you know, as we all get older, it gets a little bit harder to have something around your neck like that for as long. So definitely try them out, see how they feel, and, you know, find the best fit for you. Also, the eye cups that are on them, some are better for people who wear glasses or not. So if you're going to be using them with your glasses, definitely you want to make sure the eye cups are made for that, as opposed to for people who don't wear glasses. Bird guides. So this is another one of those places where it pays to do it right. So I don't know if the one on the left, here's my copy. I don't know if that one is still in print. I tried looking it up on Amazon last night and it was like ridiculously expensive, which usually means it's out of print. But I got to tell you, this is my favorite bird guide ever. And I am an ID guide junkie because I also have this one. This is another good one, especially if you have kids. This is another good one if you're going out and you want to see things besides just birds. It's got a little bit of everything in it, including astronomy and insects and plants, and like, they're all great. As beginning birders though, I highly recommend you getting a regional specific one. Obviously for those of us in Illinois, finding a Birds of Illinois guide is going to be good because it's going to save you the frustration of, oh yeah, I think that's it. Oh wait, it's endemic to Louisiana only. Not it. So because, you know, yeah, we get the occasional visitor or whatever, but because most of what you're going to see is going to be something that's commonly seen here, having a regionally specific guide is really good. That said, I am being dragged kicking and screaming into the new age of technology. So the Cornell lab put out a guide called Merlin. It's fantastic. I love it. It's so easy to use. It asks you a couple of questions, you answer a couple of questions, very easy, and then it shows you some possibilities for what it may be. When I say easy questions, it's what is the date? What's the bird doing? About how big was it? Was it, finch size? Was it about the size of a robin? Was it about the size of a goose? Like, that's how they divide it up. And then what are the colors? And you can pick up to 3 colors on it. And then it tells you some suggestions. So easy to use. Kids can use it. It's fabulous. I love it. And then Seek by iNaturalist is another really good one too. Uses a lot of machine learning, computer recognition kinds of things, but then also crowdsources IDs when they're a little more difficult. Super cool. So highly, highly recommend those two. I've had Merlin on my phone forever, and I can't tell you how many times I've used it. I love it, love it, love it. All right, let's see. So the name of the book, again, the one I have here is Birds of Illinois, DeVore, Bailey, and Kennedy. That is my favorite. If you can find a copy of it, that is my absolute favorite one. I like how it's divided out by the families, lots of bright pictures, lots of useful and interesting information about the birds as well, rather than just, here's the defining characteristics of it. So that one is my favorite. That's the one there on the left. This one here, this for kids, this is Peterson, and it's just called The Young Birder's Guide by Bill Thompson III. So it's just The Young Birder's Guide to Birds of North America. Again, not regionally specific, but it's really good for kids. It's got pictures in it along with lots of fun facts and, other interesting stuff in there that kids might find a little more interesting. And then the other one that I brought here was my Kaufman guide. Kaufman's got lots of other books as well, lots of other field guides, but this one is just Field Guide to Nature of the Midwest. And it just, rather than having to bring 6 or 7 books with me, I can just bring this one, and I've got plants and insects and birds and astronomy and, a little bit of everything in it. So that's another nice one to have as well. So yeah. All right, moving along. Double check here. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, here. Here's what I'm going to do. I forgot. I thought you guys could see my picture up in the corner, but here we go. Let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. So this is my Birds of Illinois, DeVore, Bailey, and Kennedy. That's my favorite one. There you go. This is the Little Bit of Everything book, Kaufman Field Guide to Nature of the Midwest. All right. And my Peterson Young Birder's Guide. So, all right. Sorry about that. It's kind of funny. I have more books, but I keep them at my office. So anyway, back to our PowerPoint. And there we go. All right, moving right along. All right, so now moving into birds that you might see in your backyard. First up, I put some woodpeckers. Now, there's really 4 pretty common woodpeckers around here. There's a couple of others that you might see depending on where you live, but these are the most common. So I actually put downy and hairy woodpeckers together there because I find the one way to distinguish between the two is size. Like, you can't tell them apart. If you just see one with no indication of size, you have no idea what they actually look like. So they look very, very similar. Hairy woodpeckers are bigger. Downy woodpeckers are smaller. So if you see them side by side, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, that's a downy, that's a hairy. Just seeing one by itself takes a little bit of experience to figure out, oh yeah, that's about the size of a downy. So anyway, so those downies are pretty common. I get them at my feeders all the time. Red-bellied woodpecker, I am fortunate enough to have one of these come into my feeder pretty frequently too. They're kind of cool because their call, I don't know, it reminds me of a jungle kind of call. It just sounds like something you might hear out in the jungle. And then northern flickers are also great too. They're just kind of a cute bird. They've got that little red patch on the back of their head and then that little black bib. And they also like to eat insects out of trees. So occasionally, if you've got some trees in your yard, especially if you have dead trees in your yard, you may see lots of woodpecker holes in them. That'll be from these guys here. Interestingly enough, if you see a row of holes, that's usually a yellow-bellied sapsucker, which we do have those around here too. We don't see them very often, but they will make these perfectly aligned holes in a tree. Wrens are up next, and if you have bird houses up in your yard, a lot of times wrens will go to those, especially the house wren. These are the two different wrens that we might see around here. So the house wren, their song is just kind of very bubbly, and I can't even really imitate it I'm not very good at bird imitations. You don't want to hear that. But the house wren just has kind of a very bubbly song. They like shrubby areas, especially near buildings. They're very tolerant of human activity. We have the birdhouse up by our garden, and so we're out at the garden all the time, and the wren who nests in that house, you know, will fly away and yell at us, but it doesn't really seem to bother her that much. They also eat lots of bugs and spiders, especially grasshoppers and crickets. So you may see them at your feeders, but you may also see them just around. I always remember my grandma had a wren who liked to hang out outside her kitchen window and sing to her, and she had named it and everything. So, you know, it was just, they're a very common bird to see around. Carolina wrens, on the other hand, are a little less common, but their song is very funny. They go tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. So they also like shrubby areas, and they also eat bugs and spiders and berries. You'll occasionally see them at your feeder, but it's kind of cool because they maintain their pair bonds year round, which a lot of birds don't. They kind of, you know, mate for one and then raise one nest of chicks and then separate and go find another partner. But these guys will maintain their pair bonds for the whole year. So they're kind of cute. Yeah, I like those guys. You might see them also if you go to like a forest preserve area or something. And notice you can tell the difference by that white stripe up by their eye. So a lot of times when you're trying to tell birds apart, a lot of the characteristics you're looking for will be like things around the eyes, things around the beaks. I didn't realize this when I first started birding, but that's where, for whatever reason, a lot of the detail is going to be by the eyes. Sometimes the beak, you can a lot of times tell what they eat by their beak shape. What they do with their tails. Some birds are more likely to flick their tails or have kind of a scissor-shaped tail, you know, whatever. These are the kinds of things that you're looking at when you're trying to figure out what this little bird is that you're seeing. Of course, I had to include eastern bluebirds, even though they're not big feeder birds, but if you live by an open space, a prairie, I know a lot of forest preserves that have prairies, they put up bluebird houses, and then there are people out monitoring them. Their populations decreased a lot as farmland started to go away and open space started to be snapped up. So people have started putting up these bluebird houses in an effort to encourage them to an area. So they like to nest in nest boxes and open spaces. We do have a couple of these nest boxes on our farm in Naperville, and we get bluebirds out there all the time. So there are some other things that will nest in bluebird boxes, so you kind of have to be careful. Tree swallows are one. Sparrows will sometimes get in if the holes are too big. So, but yeah, they love the open fields, golf courses, fence lines. They eat lots of insects in the spring and summer, and then they switch to berries in the winter. They do migrate out of here for the winter, so we don't see them so much. But then their call is a very warbling kind of turly kind of call. So yeah, love those bluebirds. If you, however, see a bird that is completely blue and doesn't have that orange breast on it, that's an indigo bunting. Those are really cool birds to see as well. They will occasionally visit feeders. I don't have a slide for them, but they're super cool. Their wings are iridescent blue. They're awesome. Their wings are actually really awesome. Their coloring. All right, my catbird. I love catbirds. Just this year, I've gotten to really like catbirds. They have a very chattery, tuneless kind of call. It's just, it sounds like somebody just rambling on and on about something. And every now and then they'll go, meow. And that's when you know it's a catbird. So I was out hiking with somebody one time and I heard what sounded like somebody was imitating a bunch of different birds. Like when you play a record on a faster speed, I'm like just old enough to remember this. If you play something at a little bit too fast a speed, that's what this sounded like. Was somebody was imitating bird calls a little too fast. And then finally at the end went, ah! It was a catbird. Interestingly enough, they've learned to remove cowbird eggs, and we'll talk more about nest parasites in cowbirds in a minute. But unlike a lot of birds, they have learned to identify and remove cowbird eggs from their nest when they see them, which is really cool. And they will eat the jelly from the oriole feeders. As a matter of fact, earlier this spring, the catbird would alert me when the jelly feeder was empty by perching outside my office window and going, mat, mat. And that's when I knew the jelly feeder was empty and I needed to go fill it. He'd follow me around the yard, perched up in the tree, chattering away at me. I don't know what he was saying, but apparently we became friends. So that's how I became friends with a catbird. All right. So cedar waxwings. Love me some. This is probably one of my favorite birds. And I say that for a lot of them, but they are just so beautiful. They look like they have little drips of paint on their wings and on their tail. They've got that black mask. They're about the size of a cardinal, maybe a little bit bigger, but they're just beautiful. They eat mostly berries and insects, so you're really not going to see these guys at your feeder, but you may still hear them, especially if you have a lot of evergreen trees and really tall pine trees in your yard, because their call sounds like a dog whistle. It's just that one single note, super high pitched, and you know, you'll hear it kind of a back and forth, just this really high pitched whistle. And I heard it for years without ever knowing what it was. And it turns out it's these guys. I never saw them, but I heard them all the time. They're also very adorable because they have this courtship ritual where the male will bring the female a berry and feed it to her. And then she'll take it and hop away a little bit and then hop back to him and hand it back to him. And then they'll pass this berry back and forth a couple of times. And like, that's their courtship ritual. And I just think that's adorable. So I've actually seen them do it once, and it's, like I said, it's super cute. So, all right, moving right along. Finches are up next. So there's a couple of different kinds of finches that you might see. Goldfinches are obviously the most easily identified bird probably in the summer. They are just, the males at least, are that bright yellow color. Females are a little bit, or not a little bit, they're basically brown. They're really more difficult to identify than the males. But once you start to kind of learn the body shape, then you can see, oh yeah, that does look like a finch. They love your thistle seed. They will stay here all winter. However, we don't see them as much because they lose that bright yellow coloring. Their winter coloring, they completely go brown in the winter. They lose that yellow and black and just go completely brown, maybe sort of a yellowish, greenish brown, but you know, definitely are no longer that bright yellow coloring. So when you see them fly, I say it's kind of like a roller coaster motion. So they kind of go flap, flap, flap up, and then drop down a little bit, and then flap, flap, flap up and drop down a little bit. And as they're doing that, they have that dear me, see me, dear me, see me kind of call. And so, yeah, so finches are really easy to identify both visually as well as when they're flying by. Purple finches and house finches, I have a really hard time telling them apart. I got to be honest with you guys. I can almost never tell them apart. However, in doing my research for this presentation, apparently purple finches are mainly just here for the winter, and house finches are the ones who are mainly here in the spring and summer. So I got to look into that a little bit more. Everybody says that purple finches look like they've been dipped in raspberry juice. I don't know. I see it in both of them. Maybe that's just me. But so they both have this sort of warbly, bubbly kind of call. And purple finches also will have this very elaborate courtship dance that they do. House finches, on the other hand, were mainly native out west, but apparently back in the 40s, I guess people kept them as pets, but it was not legal. So pet shop owners in the 1940s, I guess, threatened with fines and things for having them, just decided to release them. And that's why they're here now. So there are several types of birds that are here because people decided to release them, and well, that's one of them. But they like feeders. They also eat insects. So, you know, I guess we'll forgive them for that. Oh, European starlings. So speaking of introduced birds, back in the 1890s, there was a group of Shakespeare devotees in New York City. And they decided that they wanted to release 2 of every bird Shakespeare ever mentioned in his plays in New York Central Park. They did that. Of course, some of them died. Others decided to take over the continent, and European starlings are one of them. So they gather in these huge flocks. I mean, absolutely huge flocks, especially like in the evening. You'll hear them all kind of come together to roost, and they make a huge racket. I mean, it's just awful. They will clean out your feeders, like just empty them. I know people who have had to bring their feeders in because they were being run out of house and home by just these mobs of starlings. On the positive side, though, they eat lots of insects, including Japanese beetles. So, you know, there's that at least. And their call is just a series of whistles and squeaks and gurgles, and they can even imitate other birds as well. So, you know, they're another one. And when they gather in these huge mobs, just hearing them all calling around it, just huge racket. So, other birds you might see in your backyard, we've got brown-headed cowbirds. So brown-headed cowbirds are kind of interesting. I mentioned these a little bit earlier. They are nest parasites. So they originally were adapted to following around the bison herds. So as the bison went all over, you know, just kind of roamed the prairies, cowbirds would follow along behind them and eat the bugs that the bison's hooves kicked up. And when you're doing that, you don't really have time to settle down and have a family. So the cowbirds, you know, if they were to make a nest and then sit on the eggs and incubate the eggs and then feed the chicks, now it's like 3 or 4 weeks later and the bison are gone. You can't do that. So instead, what the cowbird decided to do was he was going to make, or she was going to make her babies somebody else's problem. And so she would go around to other nests and lay an egg in other birds' nests. Their babies hatch generally faster and are bigger than whoever nest it actually is. And so a lot of times these cowbirds will end up out competing the original babies in the nest. So, you know, because they're bigger, they shade out, demand more food. They get, you know, convince the parents to feed them more. You know, a lot of times the babies who were originally in that nest end up dying. So some birds have developed unique strategies for getting around that. Like I said, the catbird has learned to identify those eggs and will actually kick them out. Some other birds once they see the cowbird egg in there, just say scrap the whole thing and they'll build a new nest on top and start all over again. Another type of bird, and I can't remember which one it is, forgive me, I just remember reading this article and thinking it was so cool. From the time that they're still eggs, mom creates a unique song and sings that unique song to the eggs every time she comes back to the nest and whatever. And then when they're babies, they're kind of taught this unique song that the cowbird is not taught. And before she feeds them, they have to sing the song back to her. So they kind of have this unique code that if the baby doesn't sing that song, it doesn't get fed. So different ways that birds have learned to cope with these cowbirds. A lot of times they just don't though, and they end up raising the cowbird's chicks, and you'll see a cardinal or somebody had a, I forget what it was, but it was some kind of bright yellow bird feeding this enormous cowbird chick, you know, because a lot of times the cowbird chick is even bigger than the parents of whoever adopted them. So it's an interesting situation that they have. They create some moral conundrums for sure. Grackles are also, they will also form huge flocks in the winter along with other species like the starlings that we mentioned. They will also eat everything, insects, seeds, berries, just everything. And their call is a series of harsh metallic sounds and chucks and not real pleasant sounding kind of calls, but you'll see these guys a lot feeding around the ground. They're a larger bird, and even though in this picture their head looks really blue, it's really more of an iridescent color. So you get it in the wrong light and it just looks completely black, but when the sunlight hits it just right, you get that really iridescent blue color in it. All right, and so many sparrows. There are, this is just a selection of the sparrows that we may see. Unless, you know, you really want to make it your life's mission to be able to identify all these different sparrows, I just look at it and go, yep, that's a sparrow. If I'm really curious, I will stop and try to identify it. The Field Museum has put together a really nice pictorial guide of sparrows, of just sparrows. That's how many there are. So check out the Field Museum's website. They have, like I said, they have a lot of different field guides that you can print out that are kind of cool, that are just, you know, one-page guides you print out and can take with you out in the field. So yeah, just know there's a lot of different kinds of sparrows out there. And then we get some seasonal visitors as well. So these are guys that come through in the spring, maybe in the fall, with the exception of the junco. Blue-gray gnatcatchers, ruby-crowned kinglets, rose-breasted grosbeaks. I saw all these guys in the spring. You know, they come through and then they just sort of go further north, or they head to the treetops and you really just don't see them too much anymore. Ruby-crowned kinglets are so adorable though. They're tiny. They're so tiny. You think it's like a little baby bird up there, but then you see that little flash of red right there at the crest, and that's your ruby-crowned kinglet. They were hanging out in the trees in the back of my property while I was doing some cleaning up back there in the spring. So it was really cute to see them. And then true to their name, the blue-gray gnatcatchers fly around gleaning insects. That means they fly around and they catch them in midair. They're, you know, super acrobatic and aerial and very, very good at that. And then so many warblers. So much like the sparrows, but okay, I'm just going to say it prettier. There are so many different warblers that come through here, and you know, they may only be here for a week and then they're gone. So it really takes a lifetime of dedicated study to be able to tell them all apart, or a good picture. That helps too. If you can get pictures of things that you're seeing, it really helps to identify them later. But yeah, they're small, they're in the woods. Like I said, you'll see them once a year if you're lucky. It's crazy. All right, and so as we mentioned with the native plants, we do have our Conservation at Home program through the Conservation Foundation. So if you put native shrubs and native plants up and you put your bird feeders up and you've got a nice bird-friendly yard, give us a call. We'll come out and you can join our Conservation at Home movement. So basically we look for a variety of native plants, you're doing things to help care for the birds and the butterflies and all the other things like that. And then you can get your very own sign to put up in your yard as well. If you want to get more involved with the Conservation Foundation, you can become a member. You can also visit our McDonald farm in Naperville or our Dixon Merst farm out in Montgomery. Our McDonald farm is really cool because it is a working farm. So we've got 49 acres that are farmed organically and operate as a CSA to provide food to over 500 families. We also have a farm stand. I believe the farm stand might be open today. It's a Wednesday. If you're watching this on YouTube, ignore this. But if you're in Naperville and want to get some fresh veggies, check us out. Check out our Facebook page first, though, because I think that's where they post when the farm stand opens up. You can also follow us on social media, speaking of Facebook, and you can get your yard certified. Drop me an email if that is something that you're interested in. And, you know, because this is Zoom, this is online classes. I just thought that was kind of funny. All right, so at this point in time, I will take some questions. Let's see. Donna says, house finches eat the Orioles grape jelly. You know, I've heard of a lot of different birds doing that, especially with their babies. Somebody posted on one of the wildlife groups on Facebook a picture of a robin feeding a baby some jelly. I don't think a robin could perch on my feeder the way I have it, but if you have sort of like a dish, I guess they could. So that was kind of interesting too. So Sarah says that you have bluebirds in Texas. You absolutely do. Seen them around, especially in the hill country. They migrate south to southern Illinois in the winter. You are probably seeing bluebirds that are native to Texas. I got to be honest, I'm not 100% up on my Texas ecology, but a lot of areas will have their own endemic population. So populations that are just specific to where they are. Here in Illinois, at least here in northern Illinois, we probably just get a little too cold for them. So they move south where they can continue to find food and it's just not quite so cold. So you are probably seeing ones that are that part of Texas. And I'm just gonna put that picture back up because it's cute. So Lisa asked, do bird feeders encourage raccoons? You know, they can, and as well as squirrels and other things as well. So there are ways to thwart that. So putting them away from tree branches so that, you know, things like raccoons and squirrels can't walk out from the tree branch and jump onto the feeder. So having it a certain distance out from a pole. So in my bird feeder, I've got a shepherd's hook, I had one that was on a shepherd's hook. I have one now that's on a post, but the post has another board that goes out a distance from the main part so that the squirrel can't just climb up the post and grab onto the feeder. They make squirrel-proof and raccoon-proof bird feeders. A nature center that I worked at, we just had so much trouble with raccoons at night that we just brought all of our feeders in at night. When we all left for the day, we would just bring the feeders all in to keep the raccoons out. There are also things like baffles, which are big, like dome-shaped things. And there we go. So there are these like big domes that go over the top so that squirrels, raccoons can't get in there. You know, there's lots of different ways to do it. So I'll tell you the story. My grandfather, when I was a kid, had this ongoing battle with squirrels getting into his bird feeder, and he was just adamant. He did not want these squirrels getting into his bird feeder. So the first thing he did, he had his bird feeder up on a post. First thing he did was he wrapped the post in a piece of sheet metal. When that didn't work, he greased the sheet metal. Okay, that helped a little bit, but now they were jumping over from the trees. So then he put, on the top of the post, he put a swivel. So the bird feeder was sitting on a swivel, and if anything jumped onto a tree, it would spin and the squirrel would fall off. Well, then they learned to jump onto the very top of it. So he took a little board and drove nails up through the top to discourage that. When that didn't work, I think he used a car battery and ran 250 volts through it somehow. Like, I'm not advising this. Don't do this. it was just very funny to see this ongoing battle of wits between him and the raccoons. So it, just, you can try, there's lots of different things to try. Personally, I have found luck. I have one of those Yankee dippers, I think it's called, the Yankee bird feeders that have different types of baffles on them. Mine has a collapsible tray so that if anything heavier than about a cardinal tries to land on it, the tray is on a spring and it falls. So that seems to work very well. As the squirrels have tried to shimmy down the tube, they get to the bottom and fall off. So is there a website or app you can hear bird calls to help in identification? Yes, that Merlin app that I recommended has all the songs on it too. So when it gives you the suggestions, if you're hearing something, if you're kind of seeing it as well as hearing it, you can go through and look, start to listen to those calls as well to help you identify them. So I love that Merlin app. It's really, really good. Yeah, another problem, squirrels and chipmunks getting into the feeder. Yeah. Oh, Sarah says, to discourage squirrels, I found cayenne pepper works well. Yeah, I've heard that. So birds don't really have the taste receptors for the hot and spicy stuff, while squirrels and raccoons do. So there are some bird seed that's being sold as a hot and spicy mix with the idea that it will discourage squirrels and raccoons. So that's an option too. Crystal wants to know who won, my grandfather or the squirrel. I think by the end it was a draw. It was definitely a draw. Does providing regularly filled bird feeder cause a bird to forget how to forage on their own? Great question, Anonymous. The answer is no. Birds know what they're doing. If, like, I went on vacation and my jelly feeder was empty by the time I came back, I guarantee you the Orioles went and found other stuff to eat. They know when they need insects to feed their babies. They know to find other stuff around. This is just a source of food for them. So they won't forget how to forage. And especially like in the winter, it can be really important because we don't have all of the native plants and things around here that would normally provide food and berries and seeds and stuff for them. It's good to help supplement them, especially in the winter. Is it better to spread out bird feeders and bird houses throughout your yard, or does it work to create a bird area? Oh, that's a good question. I'm sure there are lots of different theories on this. Personally, I like having a bird area because I can kind of concentrate on that area to have the shrubs and the cover that they need, to have several types of feeder stations. And it's quite honestly easier to take care of when it's all in one area like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it either way. Whatever works best for you. But personally, I kind of like having it contained in one area. It makes it a little bit easier for me to care for. Catherine says, hummingbirds and finches love red or pink or white salvia. Yeah, salvia is great for hummingbirds. They do definitely like that. They like petunias too. There's a lot of things. Basically, any kind of trumpet-shaped flower, hummingbirds just love those. And that's what their beaks are adapted to eat, right? They've got those long beaks, super long tongue, so that they can fit into those trumpet-shaped flowers. Let's see. Sarah says, I've let the birds get rid of sprout since the feeder was only over dirt before. Is there any downside to that? There can be if that's stuff, because sometimes that stuff can get kind of weedy. I had a thistle feeder in an area, and not too long after that, I ended up with a lot of thistle in my yard that I'm still trying to get rid of. I don't know for certain it was that seed that was maybe not sterilized like it should have been. So I don't know. Generally the stuff that would be sprouting out of there, I mean, the sunflowers would be fine. Like, there's no downside to sunflowers, but I'd be surprised if they let the sunflowers get out of there. But the rest of the stuff is usually a lot more like agricultural type stuff, like Milo and all that is more agricultural stuff. So it can look a little bit weedy. That would be the only downside that I would see to that. Debbie says, I take down my feeder in spring to encourage the birds to eat bugs. That helps my garden to stay healthy. Should I be feeding the birds over the summer? I live in the North Branch floodplain with lots of native plants. You know, it's kind of a personal preference. As I mentioned, they'll eat what they need to eat, like they know. So there's really no harm in leaving your feeders up, you know, and I've heard people say the same thing, that like for Oriole feeders that you're supposed to take them down in July, or in June, I guess. But I think I've had a pair nesting in my yard because I had the feeder there. And when, you know, I still see them, but they're not on the feeder as much because I'm sure they're going out and getting bugs and other things that they have to eat. So again, that's kind of a personal preference. As long as you have lots of other native stuff and things around for them to eat, it's great. Sandra says, we have a 3-season room facing our backyard. We'd love to having a little bird feeder in the yard, but are concerned about birds hitting the windows. We generally have a few bird casualties every year as it is. Great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So in stuff that I was reading in preparation for this, because you guys know I do lots of research for you before these, I found, first of all, they recommend that bird feeders should be about 3 feet from a window or greater than 5 feet. And the reason for that is if your feeders are 3 feet from the window, they don't really have time to get a full start if they're going to hit the window. So generally they will hit it at a slower speed and not cause as much damage. So, but if it's between that 3 and 5 feet, that gives them a chance to really get a good takeoff. And if they hit the windows, it can be worse. I also, because I've been having a problem with birds hitting my windows, picked up something on Amazon, and it is these little guys. So I love that they look like real leaves. So when you take them off here, off the backing, they're actually really transparent. I've got them up on my windows and they don't block the view at all. They're a little bit frosted, but you know, not bad at all. And so all of my windows where I generally have birds hit, I put these up in those windows. And so far they seem to be working pretty well. So having little decals like that, there are things that you can print out to put up there that are like bird silhouettes and things, just something that lets them know this isn't a, you know, this isn't an open area for you to fly through. I've also seen things like, especially for high-rise buildings, they're starting to develop this stuff called bird glass, and it's that same kind of translucent thing. If you look at it, it looks like a clear piece of glass, but if you hold it at sort of an angle, you can start to see like these little stripes through it, and it's supposed to mimic spider webs that birds will naturally avoid. And so it's this really cool glass. It's apparently really expensive for right now, but it's sort of a new thing that they're coming out with. So yeah, lots of different things that you can do to help keep birds from hitting your windows. I know, because it's always so sad when they do. An easy way to keep your feeders clean. I mean, just wash them out. That's really what I try to do, is rinse them out in between fillings. Like my one seed feeder is actually, it's a pretty big tube, and so it's a generally good idea. Just take your hose and sort of hose it out, get rid of all of the gunk that's in there. And then maybe once a month, every other month or so, wash them with a real diluted bleach solution. That'll help to clear out any fungus or bacteria or things that grow in there too. So you can get like a bottle brush. So like for baby bottles and stuff, they have those little brushes, and you can just use that to help clean them out too. But yeah, that's probably the best way to do that. And then especially for the Oriole feeders, with the reusable drinking straws they make these little tiny, they look like bottle brushes, but they're made to go through straws. I find those work really well to clean out hummingbird feeders as well. Let's see, Sarah wanted to know where I got those decals. Amazon, you get everything. Just look up bird decals on Amazon. These are the realistic leaf design, but they've got all different kinds of them out there, and they're just window clings, so they just sort of peel and stick, and then you can take them off and put them back on, and they're great. Yeah, robins during mating season, man, the robins are so dumb. I love them, but they really are dumb. You know, they see your window and they think that's another male that's there, and they're gonna fight that bird in the window. And yeah, I've had trouble with those and cardinals too. Cardinals will do the same thing. Sylvia wants to know, will the jelly go bad in an Oriole feeder? Generally not. In my experience, quite honestly, the little containers are small enough, the birds eat it before it has a chance to go bad. Other note, sometimes you will get ants in it. That's actually okay because Orioles eat bugs too. So it's like a little extra snack along with their jelly. So I honestly, I'll just leave the ants in there, brush it off when I go to change it. You know, bring it inside and clean it out when I change it. But I generally haven't had, it doesn't sit there long enough really to go bad. Let's see, Anonymous says, I had a hummingbird feeding from a purple coneflower. Interesting. I wonder if they were eating bugs, because hummingbirds will eat bugs too. So there may have been some bugs in there or something that they were eating. But yeah, I would be very surprised to see that, because it wouldn't seem like there'd be enough nectar in there. That's interesting though. Janice says, hopefully be able to replay this presentation more than a couple of times. Yes, it was recorded, so it will be up on our YouTube channel within a day. I usually get it up there within a day, so you will be able to watch that, sure. And yes, Orioles also, Donna, will slurp from the hummingbird feeders. As a matter of fact, that's how I knew it was time to get my hummingbird feeder out, when I saw an Oriole perched on my hummingbird feeder. So yeah, they like that too. Betty wants to know how to attract owls. That's a really great question. I'm not sure I know of any way specifically to attract owls in. I mean, having the habitat for them is key. So having the tall trees, you know, if you've got some big old oak trees in your yard, that's great. Having, I mean, I hate to say it, but you know, having chipmunks and voles and field mice or things like that in your yard, that's what they eat. So that will attract them as well. So but for the most part, owls need a lot of space and big tall trees. So if you have a large, we're talking like couple acres yard with big tall trees in it, that's the perfect habitat for them. Yeah, they're a difficult one. I don't know if they go in, I don't know if you can make a nest box for them. I mean, it would have to be a very big nest box. And it would have to be very high up in the trees. So you might need a cherry picker or something to get it up that high. Yeah, I miss the owls in my neighborhood. There was one time, a couple years after we moved in, I remember going outside because I was hearing 4 in all different directions. And I haven't heard them now for a couple of years, or if I hear them, it's very, very rarely. So yeah, I'm not really sure how else you would go about attracting owls. That's a good question though. I'll have to look into that. All right, so I think that is all of the questions that I had, and we are out of time. So I want to thank you all for attending. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you back again on Monday when we're going to talk community solar. So thank you, take care, feed those birdies, and we'll see y'all later. Thanks, bye.